Hey y'all, welcome to the Athlete's Health Deep Dive, the weekly episode where we get a mental performance theme of the week, dive deep into its insights through some tips, tricks to remember it, tools to apply it. And the goal here is to just give you more value. The athletes, coaches, parents, anyone give you a glimpse into some themes and topics surrounding mental performance in these longer conversations, and then what some of these conversations in our group coaching calls can potentially entail. But ultimately, we aim to help you out, get you using these tricks, tools, adding the tool belts to your bag, or adding the tools to your tool belt, to your bag, and up that mental performance. And then at the end of this, maybe you are more intrigued to check out some of our coaching services. But each week, we have a theme. And this week's theme is navigating setbacks, turning setbacks into comebacks. So let me get you going on a quick little story, and then we are going to dive deep into navigating setbacks and turning them into comebacks. And the story I just want to present to you very quickly here is thinking the feeling, right, that of losing a game, a project falling apart, a goal slipping out of reach. Right? These are all feelings that it's like, oh man, we just got set back. This sucks. This is not good. Right? And every setback, while that is the case, but we can see it as another way in that it is an opportunity waiting to be flipped into a comeback. Think about any sports team that's been trailing behind. They were losing. But then they turned it all around, okay? Suddenly, they had a surge, and they surged forward, and they got the win. That's the moment we really remember. We don't remember that they were losing, and then they were losing and then halfway through the game, but we remember that they turned it around. And today, we're going to break down how you can do the same, how you can turn it around, how setbacks are not just roadblocks, but they're actually the fuel for that next big comeback that we have. Therefore, we have our 5 tips, tricks, and tools to use for this. Tip number 1 is turning frustration into curiosity, because setbacks often kind of ignite some frustration, right? If you think about a setback, we're probably going to think about how we're not too happy with it. They disrupt our plans. We have a plan. We have a map set out on how we're going to get to the top of the mountain, and these setbacks just throw us down the hill. Now, instead of dwelling on these setbacks, on these frustrations, we can instead use it as a signal to ask why. Why did this setback happen? What can we learn from it? And that's why this trick is the curiosity shift. We're going to shift what we're focusing on into some curiosity. Tools are when frustration arises, we can just take a breath and we can ask ourselves, what is this trying to teach me? Because at the end of the day, things will happen, and we can either roll with it, we can let it be, we can get all super mad about it and just be done, or we can learn from it, ask, what's this trying to teach me, and evolve from it. Another thing that we can do with this, if we need to or want to, is journal the thoughts about the setbacks. Focus on lessons rather than just regrets. When we can focus on all this stuff and the lessons rather than the regrets and what ifs, we're setting ourselves up, not setting ourselves back for where we can go. So just put this in perspective of an athlete who loses the game, and they got 2 different ones that on the team. They lose the game. Now, one is fuming over the mistakes. They are so mad that they're done. They're saying they're going to quit, et cetera, right? The other one reviews the footage. They study more strategies, and they come back to the next game stronger. The next match, they are ready to go. Whereas the one athlete kind of sit and sulked. He was upset. They were upset, and now they're kind of done, right? They did not get any better. They didn't learn from it. They're probably still kind of in a weaker mindset of, that last game wasn't good, I'm not good. Whereas the other athlete use tip number 1 of turn frustration into curiosity with the trick, the curiosity shift, the tools. They asked themselves, what's this trying to teach me? They journal down some stuff of the setback, turning into set ups to learn some lessons to get forward instead of having more regrets. And they ultimately crushed the next game. Tip number 2 is reframe anger into hope. And this somewhat builds off of that last one that we were just talking about. But anger often follows setbacks. We get pushed down the hill, we're upset, we're mad. Anger burns energy. We only have so much energy. If you're a battery and you got 100% to start the day and you get knocked down the hill to start the day and you're mad, all of a sudden your energy's from 100% to 50%. Instead, we can reframe anger as hope for new change and a new chance, right? You know what you didn't work. So that's useful because we can use that knowledge to build hope for the next attempt. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing here with the trick of the hopeful spark. Right? I said, you get kicked down the hill. Oh, anger is getting fueled. Anger is starting to fire. That's why this hope is the spark to kick it in a new direction. Tools create almost a hope list, right? This is a list of actionable steps that can lead to improvements, like things that you're trying to do that you know you can do. And the thing about this hope list is now it's an actual, it's steps that you can take. And that the first one is that spark, and this list is actually the spark to get us going there. And then if we want to, we can use some positive statements to reinforce the beliefs in a better outcome. We can train ourselves in a few different ways to get ourselves implementing these tricks and the steps along this hope spark list to really get it going. And this way, I just want to put us in another perspective of an athlete, and that they had the chance for that last shot, right? You've probably been there. They had that last play option and they missed it. It didn't work for them. Okay. They lost the game. I mean, obviously there's all the other things that happened in the game, but they had that last opportunity. So they thought they lost the game. Now, they used this tip number 2 of the reframe anger into hope with the trick of the hopeful spark and these tools of the hope list, because they had that disappointment, that anger, they channeled it into extra practices, into getting that hope, like, all right, I think I can do this for the next time, into that confidence for that next opportunity. And sure enough, that's what happened. Next opportunity, it was presented, the kind of end game situation, and boom, they crush it because they got their spark going. And that's what we're doing with this tip number 2. And I just think, a story of Michael Jordan after he lost one of the championship finals. And his trainer, Tim Grover, says, all right, let me know. And this is in one of their books. Let me know when you want to get back to training. And Michael Jordan used this spark right away. He said, tomorrow. This was right after they lost the championship. He said, tomorrow. So he was already getting ready to get it going. Hey, thanks again for tuning into the Athletes Health Podcast. Your support really does mean a lot. We are passionate about bringing the mental health and performance topics to the forefront because, let's be real, the mental health crisis is a huge issue in society. Now, if you're enjoying the show, it would mean the world to us if you could just give it a 5-star review and share it with anyone who might benefit this message. Every bit helps in spreading the word and creating a stronger, healthier community. This podcast is just a small part of what we are doing at the Athletes Health. We work directly with teams, coaches, and individual athletes even to help them unlock their full mental performance and ultimately overall performance. Now, whether that's getting the competitive edge, breaking through mental blocks, or just leveling up in the mental gym, we're trying to cover it all with people. So thank you for listening and supporting our mission. Now let's get right back to the show. Tip number 3, test, max out, and solve mysteries. Let me put this together for you. Every setback is a test. It's an opportunity to discover limits, max out efforts, and solve unknowns that lead to growth. That's how we get the test, max out, and solve mysteries. We put all that stuff together, and we can do that in any performance bout, any athletic endeavor that we have. That's why this trick is the peak performance puzzle, because we got to put these three pieces together. Tools on how we do this. Treat each setback, right? It's setting us down the hill a little bit, as a max out day in training. It's meant to test you. It's pushing your limits. It's expanding your limits. That's the reason of the max out. Max out. If we're talking about in a weight room, we go as heavy as we can till we fail sometimes. And our nervous system is taxed. Our muscles are taxed. We recover the next day, right? But then we're back and we're stronger. We're more, have more ability to lift that weight. And another way to look at this, or another tool, is approach the setbacks like a mystery to solve. So identifying what led to it and how to avoid it the next time, right? This is a mystery. This is that puzzle that we're trying to put together of testing, maxing out, and then solving the mystery. So that's exactly why we can look at it as a max out day and a mystery that we're solving. Therefore, I want to put this in perspective of a marathon runner. So if you haven't run a marathon, you probably have heard about hitting the wall during marathon. When you're around like the 20-mile mark, give or take, you lose all your energy, literally, like glucose and everything else. And you got to just keep pushing, change into what energy states you're using. Now, they use this wall to test the gauge for stamina, to figure out the nutrition needs, adjust the training to perform better in the next race. And practice, they're getting ready for this. They're pushing how long they're running. They're pushing their pace that they're running. And all of this is to say they're testing. They are doing, sometimes in their trainings, max outs. Closer to a race, they're not maxing out, right? But ultimately, they're solving their own mystery of how they can run that marathon, how they can get through that wall most efficiently to them, run the fastest time that they're able to do. And that's what we can do with these setbacks, because those are all setbacks that they could have. So when we look at this mental game, we gotta just test different things out. We're going to max out, especially when we're getting pushed back, when we have those setbacks. Those are our max outs. And then we're solving these mysteries, putting it together. Because that's tip 3, the trick, the peak performance puzzle. We're putting those puzzle pieces together, finding the clues to find our peak performance. Tip number 4 is pause, pivot, and pursue. I love putting some letters together, easier for us to remember. And P's are just perfect. I have a lot more different P little groups that we could talk about, but this is the one we're talking about for tip 4, pause, pivot, and pursue. When setbacks break our momentum, because like we got the momentum, we're climbing up the hill, but all of a sudden we trip a little bit, we lose stride, boom, momentum is broken. We need to imagine it is like a rope, like a rope bridge snapping beneath us now, but we're going to pause in the middle of time. We're going to pause time, and you get to choose. We crossed the rope bridge because we're in the mountain and we're going from one peak to another peak, and we're crossing the rope bridge, and we're in the middle of the bridge, and boom, it snaps. Time pauses. You choose. Are you going to grab the rope that's swinging you towards that next mountain that you're reaching for, or it's just going to swing you back to safety? So it's either going to swing us towards closer to that goal, or it's going to swing us back to safety. And this is why we have pause, pivot, and pursue, because this trick is the swing forward. We got to pause. The tools for this is visualize the setback as a pause button. That is the bridge breaking. That step back, pause, hit that pause button. And it's giving you actual time to reassess and decide your next move. We're letting gravity go for a second. We're pausing in the air with that bridge snap. What we can next do is focus on the small achievable step that really allows us to regain the momentum and push towards the goal. That's our pivot. We might have to pivot some, right? Maybe we thought we were going one way, but maybe we got to go another way. And so while we are pausing, we can pivot. Just like in any sport, when we pivot the feet, this is exactly what we can do. Pivot the perspective of where we want to go. And then ultimately we pursue it. We grab hold of the ropes that's going towards our goal, not going back to the safety. We want to keep going, right? And boom, we swing, then we can start climbing up. So that's where we pursue. I want to put this in another quick story of some athletes who you probably can think of some where they're recovering from an injury, right? They have an injury and they were on track. They were doing really well. They were training and everything else, but they have to learn how to pause. They have to shift their training focus and find alternative ways to really stay engaged until they're fully back in the game. They have to figure out ways to keep going, to keep seeing the game, keep studying the game. So they pause with the injury, they pivot what they're doing, but they're still pursuing that ultimate goal of what they're trying to achieve in that peak performance. So that's tip number 4 with the trick, the swing forward. If we're pausing on the bridge, we're grabbing hold of the ropes that are swinging us forward rather than swinging us back to that safe. Lastly here, tip number 5, remembering that the clock hasn't run out. Just like in a game, comebacks happen when the team keeps playing until the final whistle. Setbacks means there's still time on the clock to turn around, means there's still time to play the game. And that is why we have to remember the clock isn't running out, because we got set back. But there are so many times you can think about any game you watched and a team came back and they won. That's exactly what we can do with the trick, the final push. We got to think about pushing ourselves through it all. Tools here are stay motivated by setting those short-term goals to maintain progress, even when things are really feeling off course. For instance, if it's in a game, your coach has probably told you if you're down like 10 points or 2 goals or whatever the case is, they're like, hey, don't think about going all the way there. Just think about getting that next score, getting that next point. And then you kind of keep doing that. That's these short-term goals. And we do this in any of our performance, right? You don't have to think about the ultimate end thing because we might not even know how to get there, but we can just think about those little ways. That's the next step to get there. And in addition to that, because we're not just talking about like in a game setting, if it's at practice, if it's at home, if it's in the school, whatever the case is, we can use reminders like a countdown timer to instill urgency and keep us moving forward despite those setbacks. We can use those reminders to say, hey, we got to keep this going. Keep this going. Hey, you're up now. Keep going. Like, test this one out. Test this one out today at 5 p.m. Test this one out at 7 p.m. Keep us in the loop. And that's kind of exactly what I was saying. I know some athletes where they're like, dude, I'm trying to start and I don't even know how I'm supposed to, and I can't even like do this. And we're like, all right, let's take a step back. You know, you got a lot of clock left. You got all of high school, man. Like, it's okay. You got it. You're going to compete against her. You're going to compete against her, but you can do this. And she's like, so this is different athletes that we're talking about. But what's the very next thing, right? What's that short-term goal to keep the progress going, to then keep taking more steps in the competition? What can we use as some countdown timers to get us put in those positions to make it stand out the best way possible? That's why tip number 5 is remember the clock has not run out. With the trick, the final push, keep pushing, stay motivated with the short-term goals, use some reminders, get that urgency going. All in all, I love to recap the tips that we talk about in here with the tricks and the tools to use it. So today we covered 5 key tips for navigating the setbacks and turning them into those comebacks. Tip number 1 was turn frustration into curiosity with the curiosity shift. And by shifting frustration to curiosity, we really open up learning opportunities for setbacks. So that was tip number 1. Tip number 2 is reframe anger into hope. We can use that hopeful spark, use that fire, that flame, kick it going with the turning anger into hope, building the energy for the next attempt. And we had that hope list of the next thing that we could do, because that can kind of tie to tip number 3 of test, max out, and solve the mysteries with the peak performance puzzle. We use these setbacks to discover the limits, solve the unknowns, and fuel the growth, right? We testing all the things, we're maxing out on those days, and ultimately we're solving the mystery to put the puzzle pieces together. Tip number 4, pause, pivot, and pursue. The 3 Ps, the swing forward method. We're on our bridge, it breaks, we pause, hit that pause on the remote, reassess, pivot towards your goals when those setbacks try to derail you, and pursue up that next mountain. Tip number 5, remember the clock hasn't run out. Use that final push. There's always time for comebacks as long as you keep going. Ultimately, guys, let me know if there's anything you'd like to adjust or add to this week's theme of navigating setbacks, turning setbacks into comebacks. Just remember, if you set back, you can always go forward. That's the perfect time to have a comeback. We use all these mental tricks, the mental game, to ensure we're performing at our best. So that's all I have for this week's deep dive. Catch us this week with our guest and ultimately the Athlete's Health podcast.